Thank you everybody for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about not just diversity, but we're talking about inclusion. And I want to really thank our panelists here. We've got Jackalyn, John, they'll be formally introduced in a little bit, Shelle and Jonathan. It's going to be a great program. So we really appreciate everybody being here. This is obviously an important topic. And I find that as soon as I learn something, I need to learn a little bit more. So it's great to have everybody here. So thank you for joining. So wanted to give you guys a little bit of the evolution of this as it relates to high rise. But first I want to tell you a story. Most of you know that I'm a 32-year commercial real estate broker. And I found myself around 15 years ago driving down the street in Encino, California, if you guys know about the San Fernando Valley. And at the time, I drove a nice car. It was all white. Back in those days, I think I even had white rims. So I was, it was kind of jazzed up. It was kind of cool. And I had a couple of clients in my car who happened to be Black. And I'm driving safely. I'm doing a building tour down a main street in a predominantly a wealthy area. And I get pulled over by the police. And that wasn't a big deal. But what was a big deal is as I looked into my side mirror, what I saw the police officer do is get out of the car and unclip his gun holster as he walked up to the car and had his hand on his gun. And it was the first time in my life that I had felt the prejudice or because I had a couple of Black people in the car and I had a car that looked a little bit like it could have been, sketchy. And, I remember having that conversation with that officer saying, why do you have your hand on your gun holster? And he said, I don't know. So that was the first time in my life that I had felt any prejudice. And, I was not happy about it. I remember getting out of the car and having a discussion with him. And of course, we didn't do anything wrong, so he just let us go. He just thought it was funny that there was, we were driving down the street in his neighborhood. So, obviously that's not what we want to do. And I'll tell you another quick story. My mother, I grew up in Dallas, Texas, and my mother always tells this story. When I was 9 years old and I had a birthday party, she was shocked to see that 70% of the people in my birthday party that I invited for my class were Black. And she thought that was great. So I don't have a prejudice bone in my body, but that is something that we have to be aware of. So let's go to kind of the history of us developing this particular initiative. So Jackalyn and John approached me about a year ago and they said, what is your plan on diversity? And I looked at them and I said, I don't know. What do you mean? I don't know. What are you talking about? So being my personality, I listened, I learned. We had those very uncomfortable conversations that I had never had in the past. I was resistant at first. There was meetings where I was like this, like, I don't know, guys. And the main reason is I did not want to cause issues with a segment of our membership in high rise. We have to, you have to put your neck out on the line a little bit to talk about diversity, especially a year ago. A lot of things have changed in this last year to the positive. So that's fantastic. But it certainly felt risky to me as an owner of a growing operation. And, I remember Jackalyn saying to me at one point, she goes, Forrest, we're not going to have these conversations unless you open up your mind here. So thank you, Jackalyn. Thank you, John, for pushing this forward. So they asked me then to get some data together. And that data was, what people of color in high rise, what is the percentage? And I was a little bit ashamed to see that we only had 5% people of color in high rise a year ago. And, that was a wake-up call for me. And what we did is we started to work on this. And in the last year, we're now at 15%. Now, I'm not saying that that's great, but that's 3 times more than we had a year ago. And I think we're on the right path. We're making great progress. So with this, we set up a committee, and that committee includes Shelle, a lot of the other folks on this call, 15 or 20, kind of a steering committee to say, hey, how do we do this? And what's the best way to go? So what we realized is that there's an entire population, and this goes back to the topic today, which is, how does diversity and inclusion make you money? So we realized that there's an entire population of business people out there that we weren't even talking to. So if you think about it from a revenue perspective, and you think about it even as a networking perspective, if you're not networking with outside of your realm, if you're not meeting with Latin and Asian and Black and all different types of people, you're missing an entire segment of opportunities, because they need lawyers. Everybody needs lawyers and accountants. So I realized pretty quickly that, boy, this is not just doing what's right, but this is also a revenue opportunity for high-rise. So if we increased from 5% to 30%, we've just increased our membership by 200-300 members. And the second aspect of that, and probably even more importantly, is diversity brings a diverse conversation in our mastermind meetings, which of course we want that. We want as many perspectives as we can get. So the things that the committee suggested were very valuable. One of the things that they suggested is we really need to focus on creating leaders within high-rise that are women and people of color. And we did that. And John's a chair, Diane Black's a chair. I've got multiple screens here. And why not make your leadership look like what you want the community of your group to look like? So that was a great move, and we've been very successful at that. And thank you for everybody that is our chairs and co-chairs. And my final thing I will say is that it also brought me to the focus of hiring my own staff. And I'm very, very happy to announce that, Denise, if you want to hop off of mute and just introduce yourself. Denise has just joined High-Rise. She's going to be working on the East Coast as what we're calling our member ambassador. Denise, you want to say hi?
Hello, everyone. So excited to be here and absolutely thrilled to join the team with Forrest and this good work.
Yeah, thank you. So we recruited her as a chair, and then we recruited her to come to work for us. So be careful when you sign up. You never know where you're going to go. But we're super excited about that. And I just want to thank you all for being here. And I'm going to hand it over to Jackalyn now and have her take away the program. So Jackalyn, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. I'm extremely pleased and grateful to you, Forrest, because yes, we've had many conversations, and yet I find that I've learned so many things as we went through that process. And I've been doing diversity work a long time, but it was extremely helpful. I'm really privileged today, and so what I'd like for you to do, if you could, is put on the picture of the panel for us so that we can have them and at least see who they are, and I'll introduce our panel. One of the things I would like to say about myself is, yes, my name is Dr. Jackalyn Rainosek. I've been in business for 46 years. I've been an organizational development consultant, and I have a behavioral science background. So I have an understanding of how to look at organizations from a very large perspective and to identify the pain and struggle where the organizations is having challenges. And through that, I often do interventions and create really high performance and great leadership. I would say something else about myself, since I'm introducing myself and then I'll introduce the panel, is that I am a certified master with the Leadership Challenge. I'm one of 75 in the world. And the Leadership Challenge is in 189 countries. So I'm pleased with having such a great opportunity to work with a program that's been worldwide. The other thing I want to say to you, though, is I'm also a visionary and dream coach. And so I help organizations move forward and get real plans for the next 5 to 10 years. But the thing I want to say about today is I started, I'm going to give you a little hint about my age, but I started in the civil rights movement. And so I was a civil rights activist. And so I have spent over 50 years, started in college, doing diversity, inclusion, and equity work. I'm pleased to announce that John Grace is here. He's an outstanding wealth manager. He is registered principal with the Security American Incorporated. He's been in this business over 40 years. He has an amazing combination of assets because he manages a total of an excess of $1 billion. I think that's an amazing for a wealth manager like him. John has appeared on 70 TV shows, radio programs, including Fox News, Yahoo Finance, Cheddar TV, I-24 News, RT America, and a number of syndicated radio interviews around the country. John provides the numbers that really show us what the challenge is around addressing inequity. Shelle Vernon is our next individual. She is a principal member of Milestone Development and Company. She has 20 years of experience as a leader, a visionary, and leadership development coach. She has been in Fortune 500 companies before founding her own company. And I think what's amazing about her, they never sent her out on a project unless it was 1.5 billion to 26 billion. She has changed the way she does her work today and is working with school district administrators and high school and college, because she's developing our next set of leaders, the diverse leaders that we will have in the future. And then my last person I want to mention is Jonathan Rubens. Jonathan is a business lawyer who has worked with entrepreneurs and investors in capital raising transactions and mergers and acquisitions. He does intellectual property issues, and he's done that since 1990. He frequently acts as the outside general counsel to growing companies and provides in California based local counsel services to non-US businesses. Jonathan is active with the American Bar Association and very much involved in the diversity initiative. So that's one of the reasons I'm so glad he's here today. He provides us information on the various laws and legal actions that are going to be affecting diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in the US. So he's been very important to me because he keeps me up to date on what's happening in Florida or other places throughout the country. So I'm really pleased to have all of us here today. I think we've worked very hard to present the program we have for you. And I feel very, very grateful for all of you that are attending. So I'm going to turn it over to John because he's going to talk about really what are the important things about inclusion and increased profitability. We have some excellent quotes. So John, take it away, please.
Thank you, Jackalyn. Great to work with you. And thank you, Forrest. Really appreciate that honest expression of your experience. And by the way, Jackalyn and I, along with the retired LA County Sheriff, just about a year ago, this is where this all started. We did something on my show called The Courage of Conversation. And that's what it takes, folks, for us to have the courage to talk about the things that we see, not to assert this is my position, I'm right, you're wrong, I'm smart, you're stupid, but to say, how is life working for you? Forrest had a glimpse of how life works for people of color, okay? Because he was in the moment at that time. And it's a good thing that it was daylight, I'm sure, Forrest, okay, as opposed to nighttime. So this is the kind of thing that I'm suggesting as we go along, that we have conversations with each other about how is life for you? How is it working? What are the problems? What are some of the things you're afraid to discuss? Because we've made you afraid, fearful of bringing up those issues. So we just kind of sit on them, but they're part of being American. And by the way, let's talk about that for just a minute. Have you noticed that when it comes to people who immigrate here from Europe, they're just called Americans. But when people immigrate here or their families have immigrated here from African countries or Asian countries or South American countries, we put their country of origin before we put the fact that they're Americans. Now, as far as I'm concerned, we're all Americans, okay, no matter where we came from. And this is home. So as I was watching a friend of mine, somebody told her, you need to go home. And she says, I will. I'll tell you what, I'll follow your lead. I'll follow you. You go first, okay? So let's talk with each other, not so much at each other about what's happening. And on that note, we're going to look at how you can have 30% higher revenue. That's from Deloitte. What can happen to increase your performance and profitability? These are all great sources. How can you increase revenue? And what can you do to engage your teams and retain more clients? So let's get into the facts, because I think the facts really help provide a foundation to see what's going on here. So our first slide will show us some of the things that we want to really focus on. And please feel free to take snapshots. This is being recorded, but this will give you a sense for where we're going to get the foundation in place. So first one, slide, please. We've got a chart coming up.
John, I think that first slide that he had on.
This is it. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm afraid that what I really wanted as my first slide was what I provided was a snapshot of appearing on a Fox TV show with David Hilton as the host, Kellyanne McEnany, and when she was head of the RNC, and Stephen Moore. And they wanted to tell me that Black Americans in particular have done much better. Now, we all want to believe that things are better than they were. As you will see, that's a belief. What you will also see, it is fundamentally flawed. In fact, in some very meaningful ways, we've actually gone backwards. Not the 1%ers, just the 90%ers. And that's really part of what I want to say to you. Be careful of looking at data or of developing conclusions based on your experience and the experience of your friends and family. Why? Because you tend to be outliers. You tend to be exceptional. Let's look at the Homer Simpsons first, and then look at your people second, not in the reverse, all because you're going to get it twisted. So notice here, we're looking at the household income in 2018 dollars. And so for all races, it's about, for 2018, 63. Notice it's best for Asians, 70 for white, not Hispanic, 51 for Latinos, and $41,000. $41,000. And you want me to believe that this is the best of times? I don't care if you're anywhere in the country, particularly in California, any coast you like. How's life? One or two people working on $40,000 a year. Not too good, okay? None of those numbers are really terrific, but we'll take any of the higher numbers as opposed to the lower numbers, right? Okay, so let's dig a little deeper, please. Here we go. So look at this. This is households on the left. In the middle is households without, they've only completed college, and then households with a college degree as determined by net worth. So for white folks, it's $391,000. That's not a whole lot of money, but it's the best number on the chart. 74,000 for Latinos, 68,000 for Blacks, and 368,000 for everybody else, lumping everybody in together. But again, none of those are great numbers. We're going to get to what could be great numbers so that you can all see we're really in this together. And as we noticed with COVID, it helped us recognize we drank the same water, we breathe the same air, and we fly the same airplane. So we really are all in this together. So let's just not get in the habit or stay in the habit of putting each other in a box and throwing each other under the bus. Next one, please. Look at this, Great Recession. How bad was it? Say you started with $1 million and your loss was 66%. What's that, $660,000 to the minus? That's correct. Roughly 50% for Blacks and only 16% for whites. This is kind of interesting. If your net worth was down 16%, and it's been a good ride since 2009, you're probably back to even and above. Those other folks, the Blacks and the Hispanics, I doubt the odds are you are back to where you were, let alone ahead of where you were. This is just the way it is. Okay, next, please. Median wealth in 2019 from Pew, nationally, 121,000, is that all? For white families, 189, best number on the chart. For Black families, can you imagine being a family with all of $24,000 to your name, all things considered in terms of the pluses and the minuses. 36,000 for Hispanic families. Neither of those numbers are really, none of those numbers are good. But again, we'll take the top number, either one. Certainly the best one in this bunch is 189,000, but that's just not wealthy, as you know. Probably these numbers do not reflect you. Yeah, go ahead, that's fine. So now here, I think it really gets more interesting. Median, now I asked this to be changed, but it wasn't. Net worth, that's supposed to be median income. It was roughly $10,000 nationally in 1970. $10,000. Now that's when the economy, according to the US Census Bureau, was 88% white. And the only other group they looked at that time, the Census Bureau, was Negro families, is how we were termed. And it was all of $6,520. Really? And here, Kaylee Ann McEnady and Stephen Moore had the unmitigated gall to say 65,000. That's when we were on at the time. He says, you know, that's real good in some countries. I'm like, Stephen, where are you going, to Venezuela? I thought we were talking about these United States of America. $68,000 anywhere in the country is not that good as far as an income is concerned. And so note this fact right here. Go back to 1970, 10,000 versus $6,500. What's the difference? It's a difference between white and black. In other words, at that time, the income for blacks was about 65.8% that of whites. Let's look at 2018. Average income, 70,000. For blacks, 41,000. Guess what? The average to the percentage of black income relative to white income is 58.5%. So we've moved backwards. We were better, closer in 1970 than we are today. Yes, go ahead, that's fine. These are more of the details. And this is actually, I could get some agreement with Kellyanne and Stephen, because they didn't want to hear any of this, okay? They had an agenda, and as far as they're concerned, they were right, and I should be happy. And I'm saying, well, I'm happy, but these numbers are terrible. All right, $40,000 for black folks, 56,000 for Latinos. Asians at the winner, 98,000, and whites at 76,000. So let's notice that Asians also, guess what, happen to be the fastest growing ethnic group in America, followed by those who consider themselves biracial. There is a browning of America. Some people have a problem with that. Some people recognize that's just the way the ball is bouncing. Let's play ball. But here's the thing, 98,000 for Asians. So they asked me, they actually were interested in this question. So what do you attribute the fact that Asians are doing so much better than everybody else? I said, well, I don't know. I haven't really studied this, but I assert that we all should have probably spent a little more time in math and science classes. That's what I think. They like that answer. So we got along on that one. Otherwise, they didn't want to hear anything I had to say. But Lisa Ling said on CNN just recently, 98,000 is the average income for Asians. But guess what? Asians, she says, are more stratified. In other words, the high is there, but the low is also there as far as Asian Americans. But we all want to do more business with people making that kind of money. Okay, take it away.
Thank you.
Jackalyn.
Thank you. And I would appreciate it if you could move back to the slide that has definitions for diversity and inclusion.
Sure.
I'd really appreciate that. Thank you much.
Okay.
What I'd like to say about this is that diversity initiatives are going to include everyone at High Rise. It is not our intention to advantage to the disadvantage of someone else. And today you're going to hear several of us on the panel really talk about what our experiences have been and what we would need to really look at. And one of the things I would like to mention is I go through some of these definitions. The reason I'm doing it is because I think before we get into the panel talking about exclusion, inclusion, and then what we recommend for organizations, we need to look at some of the definitions. And I'll admit that I've thought about them a lot, and I'm going to give recognition to James Rogers, who helped me a lot think about this and gave me some great ideas. But how I want to define diversity is it is a collection mix of similarities and differences. We know it's easier to identify our differences. Our work is to help you identify what you have in common with people who you may see as different, that allows you to create a more comfortable and productive work relationship. And I love that definition because I think it says so many things about what we want to do in our diversity initiative. I think inclusion is simply a sense of belonging on a team, a work group, or in an organization. And that's what we want to happen at High Rise. Assimilation is something that I think limits inclusion. So what it really means is I absorb the cultural traditions of a population or group, and I minimize my own culture. If we really want to take advantage of different perspectives, since these different perspectives offer unique values to our organization, we should seek to reduce the need for assimilation. I think probably all of you know about discrimination, but I think I want to define it as well. The act or practice of according negative differential treatment to individuals or groups on the basis of class or affiliation as a race, religion, or gender. In every organization I go into, one of the things that is essential is to look at the productivity of the diverse workforce and to eliminate things that create that differential treatment. All of us have implicit bias, there's no question. We all have had experiences that have taught us behaviors and attitudes, and this leads us to sometimes having negative differential treatment of others. Prejudice. This is an act on or acting or on a prejudgment based on insufficient knowledge and experience with an individual or group of people and holding to that attitude. Again, this program is on inclusion. So how can we be more inclusive in our organization? We have to learn how to lessen the implicit bias we have and work on our prejudice. And then stereotyping. It's really attributing characteristics to a group or individual that are simplistic and really are assumptions based on what the characteristics are of that particular group based on significant biological differences. These stereotypes are formulated based on what we see or experience with groups. As we work with different groups of people, we educate ourselves, our groups, our individuals from that groups, and it helps us become much more conscious of the stereotypes we do. Now, I think it's beneficial to look at these definitions, since they give us a chance to really consider how we need to change things in our organization and be much more inclusive to really work with the very diverse workforce that we have in most organizations today. I'm pleased to say that John will start first. We've all agreed to talk about, as in the panel, we've all agreed to talk about how we have excluded someone, how we have been excluded, or how we include people, and then what our organizational recommendations are. As a final thing, I would say that we are very interested near the end of the program. We will be asking you to put in the chat questions that you may have or comments you may have for us as we go through this program. Each one of us have 10 minutes to talk about our experiences, and so I'm delighted to turn it over to John, and he'll be the first panelist that really talks about his experiences himself.
Awesome. And Jackalyn, I just want to make a comment one quickly as well. If you'd like to be included on the list of attendees, please click on the link in the chat and go from there. John, you're on.
Well, thank you. I can represent that since I've been in the securities business since 1979. I actually apologize for my industry because the industry looks like America back in 1980 when we were 70% white, okay? And it hasn't really changed. And I love going to a workshop. This was the last workshop I attended 2019, happened to be in Seattle. And one of the principals from the firm, 1,000 people in the room, was making sure there was applause because of the fact that they were so pleased that there was 20% participation with women. And so I had a chance to talk with them afterwards because I was like, you're giving yourself an applause, like patting yourself on the back? Let's see, has that number changed since 1982? I really don't think so. But if we look at the country, let's look at it by how it is divided, and it's 50% roughly women. And you're jumping up and down because you're at 20%, the same place you were 10, 20, 30 years ago. I'm sorry, I just don't see the progress. But if you really wanted to make some progress, I appreciate the women initiatives and the workshops you have to bring women into the securities business. Well, how about widening that door or putting a different label, a welcome mat out, not just for women, but for all people, particularly people of color? Because see, here's the problem. It's not an industry that discriminates, in my opinion, in my experience, but it is an industry that is completely set apart and exclusive. So in the old days, if your son was interested in becoming, or daughter was interested in becoming part of the banking industry, and I worked there, you'd say, hey, look, I want Junior and Missy to talk to you about becoming a banker. And away we'd go, right? But if I live on the east side and you live on the west side, and I want my kid to talk to you about what they want to do that you do right here, right now, do I have access to you? No, I don't. So that's the problem. It's a lack of access for so many things. And it leaves a lot of the growing numbers of the population really in the dark from the standpoint of not seeing what's available and being stuck with things that are really subpar. But if we don't have competition as part of the mix, it's something that, as I say, so many people get left at the gate. They're not able to participate. And that's what we are doing here, is widening that door all over the place in so many different perspectives to say, you're all welcome, all right? Remember when you were in grade school and you were jumping up and down to get picked on the team? When it came to basketball, I never got selected. That was not fun. Guess what? You are appreciated just the way you are, just how you are right here, right now, and we've got room for you. So I think I will end it at that, Forrest.
Right. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Jackalyn?
I think that who we're going to go next with is Shelle, and I think John's given us a little extra time. So Shelle, if you need about 11 minutes or something, please do that. So Shelle, you're up next.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending upon what part of the country you're in, everyone. Forrest and Jackalyn, thank you so much for allowing me to share my experiences with everyone on the call today. I would like to talk to you from the perspective of diversity of thought and the lack thereof, and how that can either decrease your profitability or increase your profitability based on my experiences when I was in corporate. So I'll start with the story of when I started out and I was young, and I started out in the automobile industry for my teenage years. And then I, moved around, worked my way up or what have you. And when I left that industry, I was on an executive management team. But there were times where the dealership would experience hundreds of thousands of dollars daily in kicked contracts, right? And so I was going through and I was saying, hey, we need to do something about this because it's holding up your cash flow, right? Again, cash flow. And so he had the foresight to say, hey, what do you think we should do? And that's when I started creating processes and procedures in his organization to ensure that those things didn't happen, right? And so the bottom line is that model started matriculating throughout the automobile industry. And I ended up saving him tons of money because that was interest that he was able to be able to make. And also, he was able to pay off his dealership early and do some other things, build up his CMA account. But from that, it launched in me, it helped me to understand my value. It helped him to understand my value, and actually tapping into the talent pool that he had in his dealership, regardless of what role they played, right? Because at the time, I was just working in his accounting office. And so fast forward my entry into, and Jackalyn, you said Fortune 500, I actually worked for Fortune 50s. So fast forward me into the petrochemical industry where, I started off just to get myself in the door because I did not have a degree. And that is important for you to understand, is that at this point in time, I didn't have a degree. But again, I'm in a Fortune 50 and I'm creating processes and procedures on these mega projects. You heard Jackalyn say 1.5 billion to 26 billion. I'm not dealing in small dollars, right? And so fortunately enough, I had a leader who would listen. Regardless of whether I had a degree or not, he would listen and listen to the thoughts and ideas that I had and listen to the things that I saw happening in the industry and happening at that company as a whole. And so he kind of turned me loose and he said, hey, I want you to just kind of peek around and see how you would change things. And so I began developing his leaders. I began developing work processes, all to the tune of saving $5 million plus per mega project. That particular company would have anywhere from 15 to 20 mega projects on the table at a time. So allowing diversity of thought allowed that particular department to contribute to the EBITDA, 5 million to 30 plus million every year. But without that diversity of thought, that would be blocked, right? And so understanding your talent pool, not judging, but walking around, and I'm speaking to those of us, because most of us on the call are in the C-suite, right? Understand your talent pool, or have your leaders understand your talent pool and pull that out of them, because there's some profitability there, right? Understanding that we all think different. And when you start hearing in your organizations things like, because this is what I used to hear whenever I was changing processes and procedures, well, we always do it this way. How's that working for you, right? You have one person that can come in and totally shift what you contribute to EBITDA, because I was allowed to think differently. I was allowed to reach my fullest potential there and then pull that potential out in others, right? And so my challenge would be for those of us on the call is to really sit back, look at the playing field of our businesses and understand who have we attracted, understand, ask the questions, right? If you're in a meeting, don't be afraid to say, hey, if someone throws out an idea, if you allow them to have the courage to speak, right? Ask them, what are they thinking? I'm a Peter Drucker fan myself. And so in one of his books, he talks about organizations looking at their processes and procedures and their organization as a whole on an annual basis, and then making those shifts, right? Those shifts will start with listening to the ideas and thoughts of your diverse network. It wasn't because that I was a woman that I was blocked. It wasn't because I'm African American. It wasn't because I was young, right? It was because there was a lack of diversity of thought. There was a lack of people understanding that the way that we do things today may not be the best way to hit those targets that we're aggressively reaching, right? If you've done something the same way for the past 15 or 20 years, and you're in the same spot, tap into your talent pool. Understand that there's innovation there. That innovation will lead to productivity. That innovation will lead to efficiency. That innovation will also lead to profits. So in a meeting, when you hear someone say, this is how we've always done it, challenge that. Ask the question or make the statement, yeah, this is how we've always done it, but I'd like to hear more about X, Y, and Z. You know, when that employee opens up their mouth to speak, your job is to be quiet and to listen, and then ask a question. Well, I see you were going with that. How about if we do this? Because when you start doing that, there's a synergy that's created in the room. And then much like in our mastermind groups, right, that synergy will lead to innovation. That synergy can lead to the next great idea to push your organization to the next level. I am big on questions, and I will ask strategic questions every time to get everyone thinking differently. I just did a strategic planning session with the school this past week, and the diversity of thought that was in the room, once I asked one strategic question, that catapulted them years down the line and helped them to create a really robust plan to grow and build the student body of the school, to bring in funds, right? But again, it's that question, it's that diversity of thought. And so oftentimes we think of diversity and inclusion only in terms of race, gender, all the other things, but I would challenge you to think about diversity and inclusion about thought, right? Because that's what's really going to impact your organization. Again, thank you, I'm finished. I'll give somebody else some extra time.
Thanks, Shelley. Jonathan, you know, lawyers can always give us lots of legal things and all kinds of things. So I know how much you've worked with the diversity initiative for the American Bar Association. So please take your 10 minutes or more that you want, because you have lots of things you can tell us about the laws and what's coming out or whatever else you want to. You're on next, Jonathan.
Sure. Thanks, Jackalyn. And just first of all, thank you very much to Jackalyn and to John for putting this whole program together and for doing a lot of work to get this off the ground and to bring us here today. So thank you. And thank you for your expertise and for sharing some of that with me in these discussions, and for your leadership on these topics. I really appreciate it. I am a lawyer. I do mergers and acquisitions and business transactions. Unlike Shelle, my practice focuses on smaller companies. So I tend to work with private companies. Often I'm helping a company be sold, somebody who wants to have their company be acquired. I just closed a transaction last night, about a $50 million acquisition of a single owner private business. So that's something very typical for me. And how I come to these issues is, as Jackalyn mentioned, I am involved in two organizations that have very robust, not always successful, but very at least robust diversity initiatives. And one is the American Bar Association. I am not, full disclosure, I'm not directly responsible for the ABA's diversity initiatives. I'm in a leadership role in the business law section of the ABA, where we have a longstanding set of diversity programs. So it's very much a part of our ethos at the business law section that we talk about diversity and inclusion issues, and we talk about our diversity and inclusion initiatives, and we gauge them and we see how we're doing. We try to check the temperature regularly. We're not always successful, but we keep the conversation going and try to incorporate diversity and inclusion. Another organization I'm involved with is ACG, which some of you may know. It's the Association for Corporate Growth. I'm a member of the San Francisco chapter. I'm a former president of that chapter. And we've had some discussions there. Also, we haven't been terribly successful at ACG, in kind of driving our diversity efforts. We've added discussions around diversity and inclusion topics at the annual M&A conference that the San Francisco chapter does. We always have included a diversity panel or diversity and inclusion discussion, and we've tried to increase sort of the discussion around these topics, but not always with great success, which is of course of concern. I'm really interested in additional conversations around these topics, including the one that Shelle was just leading us in about how it's important to think about diversity and inclusion in various ways that affect and are important in our businesses. I love the idea of having more discussions around diversity of thought. But anyway, I'm fairly new to High Rise. I'm a fairly new High Rise group chair. And in one of the early conversations with chairs, I simply asked about diversity and inclusion. And lo and behold, careful when you raise your hand and ask a question, because you might get asked to be on a committee. So I said, well, what is High Rise's diversity and inclusion effort or initiative? And suddenly the answer to me was, oh, do you want to be on the committee? And I could not very well say no at that point. So here I am. So, that's really part of why I'm here today. I also think it's, maybe, Jackalyn and John thought it would be useful perhaps to have the perspective of a white male on the panel to talk about, because we can all really talk about what we think about when we think about these issues and the experiences that we've had with exclusion and being excluded and excluding others. So I'll certainly, turn to that now. Let me turn to that right now. So exclusion. So I, as many of us, have had experiences in my life where I have been on the exclusion side or felt excluded, been excluded. For me, most of the time, it's probably because I'm a Jewish American. So I feel sometimes, I think about it from that perspective. When somebody asks me, well, have you ever experienced, being excluded as Jackalyn did? That's the first thing I think of. And, it's perhaps as a white Jewish person, you're not as overtly discriminated against in many situations as people of color are, or the experiences. We're not here to rate our different experiences, but that's what I think about when my religious holidays haven't been respected in certain circumstances, or when I go into my house of worship, a synagogue, I have to go through a security check and go past armed guards because our house of worship has been the target of bomb threats and terrorist threats for decades now. And so that's sort of my experience with my identity and my religion in America. What about experiences of excluding? I can relate to that point as well, as I think many of us can. And I do know that I have been, and by the way, the legal industry is not much better than the financial services industry in terms of the white makeup. And it's interesting, and I'm pausing from what I was about to say here, but when you look at the legal industry, there's somewhat of a decent track record at the law schools, at the professional associations, including at some parts of the ABA and the state bar. And we have these groups we refer to as affinity bars in the legal industry. But as many of the lawyers on this call know, the law schools have, in many situations, done a decent job of increasing the diversity of the student body. Law schools uniformly now graduate as many women or more women than men. The law schools have added to diversity, people of color in some aspects. In some places, it's not a very good track record. In some, it's better than it used to be. But the industry does a bad job of retention. So if you look at the track record of who remains in the partnership ranks of the big firms, it's still by and large a poor reflection of those, or of those efforts, or a poor result of those efforts. So you still see by and large a white, and somebody's commenting that they agree, thank you. But you still see the problem if you look at the partnership ranks across the country. So what happens? It's something that at places like the ABA, we have these periodic discussions again and again, year after year. Why is it that we have retention efforts at the early level, but when you fast forward and look at the partnership ranks, people are the diversity is lacking. Anyway, so the legal industry has that problem as well. So I think about it from the perspective of as a lawyer and a partner in a law firm. I know that I have been on the excluding side where we've excluded people. And I think that, like many, what happens is, and John was alluding to this issue of lack of access, which I think is really important. In the hiring decisions and the way that we bring people in to our organizations, we often tend to, and some may say it's only natural, we tend to gravitate toward the people that we feel comfortable with because they're very similar to us. And we end up having more conversations with people who look like us and are similar to us, maybe come from the same neighborhoods or same places or went to the same schools. And guess what? Who do we end up extending offers of employment to? People in many situations who display those characteristics and we have those commonalities with. And it's harder to deliberately hire a more diverse workforce because you have to sort of step outside your comfort zone and deliberately make an effort to try to get to know people who aren't like you and may not share the same circumstances, experiences, come from the same neighborhoods, et cetera. So as a lawyer at a law firm, when we've done hiring, and we're a very small law firm, so while we don't do a lot of hiring, on a regular basis, a single hire has a great impact on our firm. And when we've done hiring, we know that after the fact, when we look back and look and see who we just hired, as opposed to somebody else, and this happened just a couple of years ago, where we were choosing between two candidates, guess what? We ended up hiring the white male candidate, and there was a person of color that we didn't hire. And in retrospect, what could we have done to feel more comfortable with that person, convince the rest of the firm that that person was equally qualified, open issue. We probably could have done more to try to think about the hiring decisions we were making, or at least be more aware of how we were going through the process. So that's one way that I think about how I'm on the side where we're excluding others, to again answer one of the questions I was asked to address today. Finally, because I want to be cognizant of my time here, I think I'm doing okay, right, Jackalyn?
Yes, you are. Keep going.
Okay.
Jonathan, can you do me a favor and talk more about the benefits and the opportunities? Because in the law firms, we have a lot of benefits when you have diverse workforce.
Yes. So I'm getting right to that with a good transition to that, which is that I do realize that our hiring decisions have had a negative impact on us, simply for not being more cognizant of or deliberate about trying to increase or think about diversity and inclusion in our hiring and the makeup of our own firm. And I know other law firms experience this as well. And very specifically, what I mean is I've been specifically told by a prospective client and a current client that we did not get opportunities simply because the makeup of our own partnership and lawyer ranks was not diverse enough. And that's a real issue that law firms and businesses in other industries are facing right here today. They are losing out on business simply because they are ignoring diversity and inclusion in the way that they operate, grow, and manage their firms. And I'm not even talking about the really important issues about thinking about diversity of thought that Shelle was addressing. I'm simply talking about the composition of our firm. When you look at our website, and you'll go right now and you'll see a bunch of white male faces on our website, we don't have enough diversity on the website, which means that prospective clients that we want to pitch won't consider us for the work, and we're losing out. And some of us may have thought, well, that's only going to apply to the AmLaw 100 firms, the very big national firms. No, even the small regional firms, we have lost out on business very recently, significant business, because we're not doing enough on diversity and inclusion. So anyway, that's what one of the problems that we face by not addressing this sufficiently, and what we can and how it can benefit us, of course, obviously, is we'll be more able to attract that business. But I also think about in my own practice, who do I want to work for? I really focus on the deal that I closed yesterday, which is selling a company that's closely held by a group of owners. Often I work with family businesses. Often I work with just a group of entrepreneurs who've put together a company. Really, it's in my interest to have the greatest possible pool of prospective businesses, prospective entrepreneurs, prospective owners to work with. And if I can have a more diverse team, I can do a better job, I really do believe, of understanding a wider group of prospective targets, of appealing to a wider group of prospective targets. And when we work with companies, we have to do a lot of our work involves trying to get to know those businesses, trying to get to know their personal stories, trying to understand what motivates them and what they're trying to achieve. And surely we can understand people who are different from us, but by having a greater, a broader set of people on our side, we have, I think, and I do believe, greater prospects in attracting a broader set of targets on the client side. So that's how I think about that.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. That was outstanding.
And Jackalyn, I just want to make a comment real quick that we, in our quest for new members, as we're interviewing, you'd be shocked at how often they ask about, do we have a diversity initiative? Mm-hmm. Or their corporate offices are asking. So Jonathan, that was a great point. And I do want to say Jackalyn's going to make some comments. We're going to have questions, of course. We are going an hour and a half here, so a door will be open here in a little bit. So Jackalyn, take it away.
Thank you very much, Forrest. I want to thank John and Shelle and Jonathan, because they brought in so many excellent kind of things. And one of the things that I do in my company, D2B Leadership Group, is that we provide opportunities to develop a diversity initiative, and we take people through the 4 stages instead of 3. A lot of companies go through affirmative action, valuing difference, and managing diversity, and they think they're finished. But we help to create socially just work environments where every person is greatly appreciated for the contributions they can make. But I think the thing that is that we do too is we believe that people have to be emotionally connected to this subject. They have to be able to emotionally process their feelings about these issues, and they have to know how to be able to communicate very effectively and respectfully, or these kind of initiatives have great difficulties in continuing in an organization. And they also have to be tied, I think, to the strategic plan and what are the things that are going to lead to much more profitability in any organization. And that has to be the focus, because if it is not, then there are a lot of individuals who are a part of the CEO, the C-suite group, are not going to be listening to the process because they want to see that profitability out of the diverse workforce. But I want to tell you also that we tend to be very clear in what we do, is that we also have to know what is it that has created a lot of our attitudes, thoughts, experiences, and so forth. And one of the things we do is we have a week-long program that we do in some of the middle stages or even in the early stages of an initiative, because it gives us a chance to take people for 5 days and to really immerse them in all the processes that they need to do in order to become much more clear. And so what I'd like to do is to go to the subject of exclusion. I'm not saying I'm pleased about telling this story, but I think it shows my implicit bias, and I think it's an important story to tell. For many, many years, and this has been probably 18 years ago, 20 years ago, but for many years, I sang in a gospel choir. And I was in a predominantly African-American church. And I had a wonderful experience in doing that. The music speaks to my heart. I was a musician. I started at 6 playing the violin. So I've really enjoyed my background in music. And so every Sunday that I went, I was uplifted because of the things that happened and just the spirit of the music and the congregation. And I remember at one point that I felt really uncomfortable being there. And I thought, maybe they'd rather not have white people in their church. So I went and talked to the minister, and I talked with him, and he said, no, I want you to talk to 3 of the women that are really the ones that are the matriarchs of this church. And so he introduced me to them. They always sat on the first row because they could always tell him when he was off base. I think that was their purpose in sitting on that in that first row. And one of them said to me, we are glad you're here. We're glad you make contributions. And if there's ever any trouble you have, just come to us and we'll take care of it. And I smiled at them and I thanked them. I spent a lot of time going to other churches and singing with that choir. And I spent a lot of time in lunches and dinners and all kinds of things. When I left that church, a year later, 10 years later, I was outside my house one night and I was putting out my garbage can at 12:30 at night. And I saw an African-American male coming down the street. And the first thing that came to my mind is you have to leave and go in the house. You're not safe. And I stood there for a moment and I said, you have spent 10 years in an African-American church and you're going to do that right now. And I said, no, you're not. And so when the gentleman walked by, I said to him, how are you this evening? It's kind of late to be walking. And he said, you know what? It's so peaceful at 12:30 at night and I don't have to mess with the cars and all that. And he said, I got home late tonight. And he said, I'm a lawyer here in Houston. And he said, I just decided I was going to walk tonight. And I said, I'm so glad. I said, do you live in the neighborhood? And we had a conversation and I met one of my neighbors. But I know that lesson taught me that I am never free from the implicit bias that is a part of my life. So I have to look at it all the time. And that's what I do. The other thing I want to say to y'all, and I'm taking a risk here, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I say taking a risk because I talk about this all the time because I refuse to be hidden anymore. I have been in a relationship for 26 years with a woman. I'm married to her. And I have been excluded many times in jobs, and it's really impacted my business because of the fact that my sexual orientation is I'm lesbian. And another thing I've noticed is that, in the last few years, it's become even more an issue because we have a situation in Houston that occurred the other night where from a gay bar, a man walked out and he was beaten very badly. And so we have things like that happen. And so in our organizations, we have to start appreciating the difference and yet finding the similarities that we all have. And so what happened was I lost a job that I dearly loved with a school here in town, a Montessori school. What I am grateful for is when the board found out that I was lesbian and they decided to exclude me, the principal of the school gave them a notice of a year, resigned from that school and said, I'll go create my own school. I am not going to stay where a school is discriminating on this level. She and I are still friends today. I still know about the school and I know they're still going. I think they've made a lot of major changes because they've started offering scholarships, so they will have a much more diverse school to work in. The other thing I want to say too is that I'm really privileged. I've met someone in High Rise and we started talking about business. And the minute I started listening to some of his views, and I won't say the word because we don't talk about politics, religion, and some other things here. But we started talking about some things and I thought, oh my God, we are very different. And so what happened was that we were talking one day and he said to me, what do you think? He said, I really don't think we can talk to people anymore that have a different point of view. And he gave me a story that was very disturbing about what someone said to him. And I said, well, I'm not the only one that's been given labels. It sounds like you have too. And I said, would you be willing to have me talk with you and you talk with me? And we start from the very beginning and find out what our differences are, but maybe what's so similar about us. And so I will say today that I have the privilege of knowing someone that we've been through all kinds of subjects, and we've gone through many, many discussions. And he did me a favor one day because he sent me a little thing called Pearl that's from Disney. And he had gotten it from his grandchildren. But it's a story about a ball and how the ball goes in and all the white guys kind of reject the ball. But then the white guys begin to support the ball. And then another ball comes in and the ball, who's now been accepted, almost rejects that, but then decides to accept that ball. And he said to me, what do you think about that thing? And I said, you and I are the balls. We're the ones working very hard to love and care about each other. And today I will tell you something. I respect his business attitude and I love him as a human being. And so that's my story. I asked permission to tell that story today because I think it's so important.
Nice.
The last thing I want to do for us, if you'll just give me a few more minutes, I'd like to talk about the things that I recommend every time to any organization that I deal with. If we're going to have high performance, we have to have diversity and we have to support it. Leaders have to show their employees that they have a profound commitment to change in their organization that will model the opportunity to really appreciate diversity and building inclusion. Another thing I want to say too is that I too believe that Shelle's emphasis on diverse points of view is essential. I think our new work environment has to go far beyond technical and functional expertise and individual abilities. They have to extend to leverage the collective talent. I think that's what my friend and I have done. We have leveraged our collective talent. I think we have to encourage and engage and partner with increasingly diverse pools of people, functions, and identity. I have a man in my High Rise. I'm a chair of the High Rise Houston 3 group. I have a man who is from India. He and I are having lunches because he wants some of my clients and I want some of his. And it has expanded the opportunities that we have, and I'm truly blessed. And I think each person needs to be able to show that their own perspective and talents are worthwhile. And I think that's what my friend and I have done with each other, is we have shown that we both can make a major contribution to our businesses and to our personal lives. And the last thing I would say is, I think that companies have to realize that they have to be willing to develop very effective ways to communicate, to process through feelings, and to resolve issues and know how to resolve conflicts. Because diversity can bring up issues that Forrest Ollie was afraid of, or that a lot of us are afraid of sometimes. And so we have to do that. So in our week-long program, we spend a day and a half developing skills and eliminating sarcasm and a lot of other things to build an environment of learning that will truly allow us to work with each other and find those bridges and similarities. So thank you all. I noticed that I'm getting in the chat a number of supportive comments. I really appreciate them.
Awesome, Jackalyn, and thanks so much for the perspective. And John, we're not going anywhere. I know that some people thought this was an hour, so we're seeing some people drop. But now is a point where we can really ask some questions. But Jackalyn, I will comment on your last comment. We have an online Google Docs called the Issues List. I think you might know about that. So if anybody has a problem with anything or anybody in the company, they put it on the issues list, and every Monday we go through those open issues list. It's a great way to open up. John, looks like you had a follow-up comment. Go ahead before we get to
real quick, and I'm going to put the link in here as soon as anyway, but here's the thing. I left you saying, we need to do the math forward because at 60,000 just isn't good enough. So you might want to write this down. And these are good data points to have conversations with people because we discover what we have in common. So the average income, hard to believe, 1970 was roughly $10,000 a year. I bought a brand new Toyota Corolla, 2176, okay, out the door, done. So that's what, 21% of the average income? So notice now today, what is the average cost of a Corolla? That's not an Impala, it's not a Ford. It's about 25,000. So here's the question. What would the average income need to be today to keep the same buying power at 20 to 21%? $100,000. That's what the average income needs to be today. And I think if we were at that level, we'd have a lot of reduced strife and stratification and issues and drama because we're all doing pretty well as opposed to the only group that's done very well is the top 1%ers. And I'll send this to you, but here's the summary. BC before COVID, this is April 2016, I'm sorry. This is from Forbes. Here's their summary. 90% of Americans are worse off today than they were in the early 1970s. 90%? That's all of us, okay? Only the top 10% are enjoying new highs everywhere, bubbles glowing all over the place. So just keep that in mind. It's a great place to have a conversation with people so that we can see how much we have in common and how far short we are from being well off all over the board.
Yeah, that's the first time I've heard that, John, the BC. Before COVID. I like that acronym. Jackalyn, go ahead.
What I was going to say is I really want to support John's facts because Dr. Kleinberg, who's with Rice University, gave a 2-hour lecture on what the changes were that were happening in Houston and the economic impact. And it's very clear that we are the most diverse city in the United States. And there is no question that our composition is dramatically changing. And so we have to start doing some things in Houston to really support a much more diverse educational program and many other things. So, because it's just not going to work if we don't. So I'd love to hear some of the questions and the panel will be happy to answer them. Sure. You can designate one of us if you'd like to ask a question, or you can just give it to the panel and then each one of us can answer it. Forrest, if you would help me with
I'll coordinate that. So you have three choices. You can raise your hand as Denise has. She is so great. Look at that. Already she's on board. You can put a question in the chat, or you can do this strange thing, which is raise your hand. Now realize I have 3 screens. So it might be tough for me to get there, but grab that tool, raise hand tool. That's probably the easiest. Denise, who would you like to ask a question, or and what is your question?
Well, yes, I do have I have a brief comment and then more of a recommendation that hopefully will
Okay.
get some conversation going around it. One, I attended a diversity and inclusion workshop last week for one of my nonprofit clients that had a virtual conference. And the woman that was speaking said something that really resonated with me. And she said, in this effort to be diverse and to, you know, focus on inclusion, people are saying, particularly white males, are saying things to, African Americans that they're hiring or who work for them. I don't see race. I don't see color. I just see human. And she cautioned against that. She said, because if you don't see me, then you miss my experience, my cultural, and the great differences that I bring to the table. And so I wanted to, one, say that, because it's easy to catch up, get caught up in this movement that I want to, be so inclusive and love everybody. And yes, we want to do that, but not in a to negate, who a person is. And, that's that inclusion part and that assimilation part that Jackalyn talked about. So wanted to say that. The other thing is, we can't probably as high rise and as an organization or as business owners, address every issue related to, diversity and inclusion. But as John has talked about, we can impact wealth. We do have that ability. And, it's as simple as maybe in the organizations that we all represent, encouraging scholarships be offered to members who are, of color, who may not be able to afford the higher costs, because we know the numbers stack up against those organizations. In America, many Blacks are, small business owners, not small business owners according to the SBA earning under 50 million, but teeny weeny owners earning, $100,000, $200,000. They may not be able to afford, to be a member of a large organization, but they need to be in those large organizations in order to grow their business, which then increases their wealth. The more we do that, we will begin to erase some of the other stereotypical things that are happening in America. So I hope that, at some point we will have more of a conversation about what we can impact, as businesses and as business owners, and wealth is definitely high up there.
Denise, I'd like to make a comment too, is that Citicorp, it's an article that John gave me. Citicorp has an excellent statement about the $16 trillion that racism costs us in America. And then it has some very simple recommendations that we could all do in order to support a major change in the wealth process. So I just wanted to support what you said and mention that.
Great.
Also, Sherry Warren, you have a question. You have to unmute. We got you.
Okay, so we have a very diverse company. My partner is Black. Our staff is Hispanic, Asian, all across the board. The problem that I find is I live in San Diego. We do a lot of business in San Diego. And San Diego, despite the fact that it's the 6th largest city in the nation, is a very, I would say, a WASP society. It really is. Mm-hmm. So we find that we have to be careful of who goes on what meetings. So my partner will sometimes say, hey, Sherry, I don't feel comfortable. This is a meeting you need to take because you're white. And sometimes we'll have meetings where we'll be like, Sherry, I need to take this one, but you need to lag back. How do we combat that? Because I feel it divides us instead of makes us a stronger company. Has anybody else experienced anything like that? And what did you do?
Well, I think that we experience that every day. I'm going to call on Shelle first and ask her to respond to that. And then I'm sure some of the other panelists will be glad to do it.
Jerry, that's an excellent question. And from my perspective, right, and first let me put this out there. I was known when I was in Fortune 50s as a bold change leader. So I'm going to put that out there up front so that you already know who my personality, right? And I wear that badge of honor because it says that I was courageous and I was unafraid, right? That $5 million plus per project, that didn't come because somebody said, oh, this is a great idea, right? That came because I stood still and I stood firm and I leaned in when my direct leader said, this won't work. You don't have time for this, right? And so I preface what I'm going to say to you with that, because had I not done that and had I not persevered and moved on for 2 years, it took me 2 years working behind the scenes, building consensus and using influence to make that change in order to impact a global organization, right? I would say to you, lean in, don't shy away, right? Now, my number one strength is strategy. So go in, have your partner with you, right? When that meeting calls for his knowledge and his strength and what he brings to the table, what he contributes, let him hold that meeting. If you need to go just so they see your face to put them at ease, then do that. But if he holds the talent and he holds the all the knowledge and he can really guide that organization or really bring that ball home, so to speak, let him lean into that. Show your face, put him at ease. And then once you do that, right, he will be able from that point on to take it. We can't continue to run and hide is what I'm saying, because you won't grow, he won't grow, and it won't send a message and it won't change the landscape of where we are, right? Similarly, if you're the one that has the strength and the talent in that particular arena, then hold that meeting. If they need to see his face, let them see his face. Or start having the conversation up front and say, hey, Sherry holds the expertise in this. And you can say, my expectation is this, this, and this. Once you tell people, what I've learned is when you tell people what is going to happen, up front, either they're going to just put that bias aside and understand and listen, or they're going to run and hide, right? And I will say what I am learning as I am growing as an entrepreneur is not all money is good money.
Right on. Thank you, Shelley. Would any one of the other panelists like to respond to that question? Because I think it's excellent. Before I do, anybody?
I would just echo what Shelley was just saying, and I've seen organizations adopt very specific policies that you know, in law firms, for example, you have to bring somebody else with you to those meetings, and the other person, as Shelley was explaining, I endorse that approach. I also would say use those, if possible, I use those situations as opportunities for growth of your own organization, by also, using us as an opportunity to bring a junior with you, maybe a junior who brings a different perspective, if not your partner who has obviously the other perspective and the expertise that's needed. So sometimes in pitches, a prior large law firm I was in, we were always required as partners to bring a second person with us so that you had two perspectives, and preferably somebody who comes from a very different perspective to a pitch. So that's easier said than done sometimes, but I think those kinds of strategies are, and I'm not a strategic expert by any means, but those kinds of policies are good to think about in those situations. And I just wanted to respond also, Jackalyn, to the comment earlier about, something about high-rise might do. And, I'd be very interested in future discussions about more deliberate initiatives that the organization might adopt. And I've seen other organizations do this, where there's a very deliberate scholarship or underwriting program where, there's some kind of policy developed how to extend the reach of the organization by maybe, extending some funding if that's possible, or partial, if not whole, to potential candidates that the organization really has a strategy of trying to bring into the fold.
Thank you, John. I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm going to try to be very brief. So I'd like to get more than one question in. And let me just say, Sherry, great question. Here's my suggestion. Change your headset. People from the South love the saying they've got more up their sleeve than just their arms. So that's what I'm saying to you. Wear that headset. And as Shelley said, go forth.
And I would just make one last thing, Sherry. I think sometimes we have to have a discussion internally in an organization about what our fear is doing to prevent us from expanding the opportunity we have of using the diverse workforce. So I would suggest that as a discussion and something that could be facilitated that would help. So
Awesome.
next question.
Yes, Sam Murthy, you have a question.
Yeah, hi everybody, I'm Sam. Before I ask the question, I just want to give a little background. I came to America from India in 1986. Okay, so I used to work for Burroughs Unisys Corporation, and first I worked in Australia for 2 years. Then I came to US, and my first project was in California. The second one was in New Jersey. When I was working in New Jersey, this was a privately held large corporation. And this was basically, owners were all very Quakers, very conservative company with most of them we had a white dominated company because most employees were like that. But I was one of the only Indians there. Okay, so I was there through Unisys. And while I was working there, I was trying to help them solve their technology problems or the computer systems. One of the girls came to me and he said, how come you are here to help us in the computers? Well, you are from India where people go in bullock carts. So I said, I know you think we are from India. So the perspective which people had at that time was India is still a third world country. How come they can come and help in computer technologies? But what I found was when I started working there is everybody was very receptive. They respected me. And when the opening came, they made me the CIO of the company also. So I never felt discriminated anytime. And down the line, I worked with various companies. I ran a distribution company where we hired Mexicans, Vietnamese, white, black, everybody, girls, boys. We kept a very diverse environment. And then down the line, I have worked with various big companies as consultants. Everywhere I found in corporate America, the diversity is always very high. Even you can see the largest companies in the world are run by Indians like Google and Microsoft or Pepsi, or everybody has been run. So when I'm working in corporate America, I feel the diversity and the way all the different people work together has been fantastic. So what I wanted a question is, am I am I not very well, updated with the situation? How do you feel everybody else? Is corporate America more diverse and more inclusive than when you step out of the corporate America? That's what I want to know.
Let me try to rephrase your question for a moment and see if we can answer it for you. What you're asking is American corporations, are they more diverse today? And then I'm sorry I didn't catch the second one. If you would let me know more.
Compared to when you step out of the corporate America, when you come to the real world, because whenever you see the news, it's all about discrimination and all that thing, the shooting and the police and all those things. But what I found was in corporate America, it's more inclusive and more diverse and that type of thing.
Than ever. Yeah, got it.
I think that I can answer that question for you. What I would say to you is I don't think corporate America is as diverse as it needs to be.
Oh, okay.
And I think that the upper levels of the organization are still predominantly white and male. And we have to see a major trend in corporations moving the talent from women and also persons of color into higher levels of the organization. I think there is a movement that's going on in America right now that is putting money behind making major changes for diverse workforces in various organizations. I can also say that there are many smaller companies that are more diverse than maybe what our corporations are. But I also think there are a number of people in the United States that still do not have a knowledge base about what the value and benefit of diversity will be to them. So we have a lot of work to do. So that would be my answer.
Great. We do have a couple of questions in the chat. Jenny Martinez, thank you for the question. So, and it's a general question. How do you address the reverse discrimination argument when making the purposeful choice to hire women or non-white employees?
Would anyone on the panel like to address that? I'll be happy to, but I want to see if someone else would like to.
So
I don't have a handle on the question, really.
Yeah, how do you address reverse discrimination? Jenny, do you want to clarify?
I think that
can you guys hear me?
Yep.
I gave a presentation yesterday for the ABA, and we went through some significant developments and you know, our increase in numbers and our intentional hiring of more women lawyers, and to increase our numbers and diversity. And then somebody chimed in, and really the only person that put a comment in that was, you know, potentially negative was, you know, I've done this for 45 years and I just hire the best candidate. I don't look at, you know, whether it's a woman, whether it's a man, whether, you know, I hire who's the best. And for you to intentionally hire, you know, more women, you are discriminating against other people who may be better for the job. And that was, it's a tired argument. And anyway, I just wanted to know how you guys, you know, in one sentence, because I know you guys are experts on this issue, deal with that.
Well, let me jump in. I would say that's a shield. It's a defense mechanism. It's bullshit, okay? But the real question, I think, becomes against what are we measuring? You can believe whatever you believe, but until we have similar data points, what are we measuring against? We all want the best, but it's not either or. You can have both. But maybe it helps to, I mean, when I went to school in Minnesota, they were pleased to say that the ratio of African Americans was at the school was the same ratio in the country. I always thought that was a good way to measure, okay? So here are the details. Today, the US is 60% white, 13% Black, 18.5% Latino, and almost 6% Asian. So if you look at it from that lens, I think you now have a common denominator, if you will, with which to say, what are we doing here? And let's notice that 2021 America does not look like it did when it was 80% white. It's never going to look that way again. So let's get past on just getting the best, because I'm saying that's a shield. And let's look to see, is this company, is this organization, is it a reflection of America today, or is it a reflection of America as we remember it 50 years ago?
I also want, I support what John's saying, but I also think there's something else. In any organization where I get that comment, I know it's time to talk about implicit bias. You have to have the training with implicit bias in most organizations in the beginning, because people don't understand how biased they are and that everybody's biased. It doesn't matter what race or sexual orientation or whatever it is. We all have biases because we grew up with our parents educating us about certain belief structures and certain attitudes. But I think the most important thing I would say to you is reverse racism doesn't exist. A white person has opportunities and benefits in America that persons of color do not have. And that's a whole nother subject that we probably can go into at some point. But my response to someone that says that is, I'd love to have time to sit down and chat with you about some of the things I've learned, and I don't do it in a group setting. I tend to sit down and quietly talk with that individual about implicit bias, about the fact that we don't have that we don't have anything that a white person can claim as reverse racism. And then I go into a long discussion. Excellent question. And I know we're about to run out of time. So I'm going to ask Forrest what he wants to do.
Well, Jonathan, you got a brief lawyer
Oh,
file?
I was just going to add very, very quickly. I know it's not a satisfactory answer to the problem that Jenny brings up, but I would say that any lawyer who said that, well, you know, of course, that you're going to lose business if you don't change your practice. Maybe you don't care about that, but sooner or later, your firm will lose business because of your practices. And also the clients that you work with are required now to have women on their boards, and soon are going to be required to have people of color on their boards, whether you like it or not. So that's how
Amen,
I
Jonathan.
would respond to that.
Well,
Thank
Jacqueline,
you.
if we want, well, Shelle, you want to, and then
Yeah,
Jacqueline,
just
you can
really
ask-
quick.
Yeah.
What I want to say, Jenny, to you is that if you start pulling data on organizations, and I think I sent this data to Jacqueline several weeks back, is when you start pulling data, when you look at how women in organizations have impacted the organization to the positive, right? That can help you justify making that decision, especially when you have a candidate, two candidates that are maybe very close on the scale of what you're looking for, right? Women in organizations tend to lead in a circular motion. There's data that supports that, right?
Right.
We don't leave gaps, right? We don't lead ambiguously. We lead in a circular motion. But also when you look at the data, and I want to say it was something from 2021, women that have taken the helm of organizations have exponentially grown the profitability of the organization. So
Amen.
I would say, come with the facts.
Yeah, because I think when you do the facts, then you know, it's really important, and it then changes. And that's what I would do with the individual first, and then see what I could do as we move through the process. I want to say some things as the ending part of ours. We hope you come from this meeting with having learned something and have some takeaways that you can say, thank you, I was very glad to be at this meeting. The other thing that, and I've noticed throughout the chat is just filled with positive comments about this program and thanking us and so forth. And we really appreciate your attendance. We're stunned at 93 people that attended this meeting today. And it shows we really need a diversity initiative. And then the last thing I'd like to say to you is that we have a survey. It's very short. We'd really appreciate your comments. Because as we go through and do more things around diversity, we would like your input and your feedback. So thank you so much for your attendance. And I'm going to say to Forrest, thank you. And I think that's the end of our meeting, Forrest.
All right, very good. Thanks everybody for being here. We'll see you out there in the meetings. Take care, everybody.